Well, good evening. It is 5:30 and I'm calling to order the August 24th, 2026 regular meeting workshop of the Clover Park School District Board of Directors. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. We will now move to reports from the superintendent. Superintendent Banner.
Thank you, President Thomas and board directors. The district has one report this evening. It will be delivered by Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Rick Ring, and it is an update on some capital projects, specifically Lakewood request for Dower easement. I know I'm leaving one more out. The easement and, the franchise agreement. Yes, Rick, please come forward.
And before you start, I'd just like to, for the record, let everyone know that Director Lowry is excused from tonight's meeting.
There we go. Well, good evening, President Thomas, Superintendent Banner, and Board of Directors. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit, give you some updates on what we talked about back in June, because really this is the two items that we had at the end of June for our workshop. So tonight I'll be talking just a brief update on the franchise agreement. Just a reminder, the franchise agreement is an agreement between the city of Lakewood and Clover Park School District that expired. And it's for our fiber network that runs throughout the city and gives us access to actually put that fiber into those areas. It runs throughout the district with the exception of Tillicum Elementary School. And what this agreement does is allows the city to allow us that, but also how does a repair take place and if there was an emergency repair. For the most part, this agreement is been in place for quite a few years. However, the language has changed over the years, and the position that government agencies have about indemnification has changed. So that's really this kind of the sticking point right now is the language about liability and who's going to be responsible. And we don't want to indemnify somebody that's actually coming on to doing something to our work and then being responsible, and the city doesn't want to indemnify us. So we are working on some language. Superintendent Banner, myself, city manager, and the policy director over at the city met last week, and we had some good conversations. So we are looking for some alternative places where we can find some common ground to get this thing done. In the meantime, it kind of just stays as status quo. So we'll bring more information to the board once we get it. I suspect we'll have something wrapped up by September, sometime in September. So it'll probably be an October board meeting timeframe. So the city has to adopt it as well. So once we get this done, there'll be more to come. Any questions on that?
So when you say things stay status quo, we're not in jeopardy of losing any internet?
No, our lines are still in place and we still go through and can get them repaired and things like that if we need to. All of our lines actually aren't buried in underground right now. They're actually all above ground on poles, so it's a little bit less cumbersome. Now, what the grant agreement will do eventually will be if we do new lines or something, we would be required to bury those. That's where it'll become a bigger issue.
And just as an addition, when we talk about the city and the district, we're really talking about the city's insurance company and the district's insurance company and language around that. So there's.
So the next one is, we talked about this one a while back as well. This is just kind of an update on where we're at with the city of Lakewood's request for a permanent right-of-way easement along Custer Road at Dower Elementary School. So we briefly talked on this a while back. Let's see. So We were notified of their request back in May. It's a public easement that they're requesting to build some, widen some sidewalks and do some improvements along Custer Road there, as well as an intersection. So nothing's really changed at this point in time. It's still a right of way. The right of ways are really basically the primary purpose for a right of way easement is for public purposes, something that will enhance safety or public access in this case. The city is basically making that request because of the frontage along the public road that they want to widen, and then they also want to enhance the safety with the sidewalk as well as the turn lane at Custer. And this is just, I'm skipping over some of these because we've already talked about the details of these, but I'd be happy to cover them if we need to. The city is basically, the scope is what I just said. Basically, they're going along Custer Road. They will add a retaining wall along our property line. So that pushes that back, and some of that retaining wall goes on the property that we would be selling the city. The widening and the turn lanes enhances the traffic around the school as well as the turn lanes around that general area. Reminder, there are 51 trees on that site. And as the city would take this over, they would be planning on removing 19 of those trees. 4 of those are oak trees. We don't have anything to do with that. As controversial as trees are, now it would be under the authority of the city and they would be responsible for that. This is just a map of a little bit of what you're seeing there. The green are the good trees. The red are the trees that would be removed. And then if you could see the yellow on there, there's some trees that are somewhat subject to more evaluation. And this would be where the sidewalk is actually running along Custer Road, and they have some indentations that they would be making for some light poles and things like that. So where we're at today is the city of Lakewood has submitted an offer to purchase a fee simple title of a portion of the district's real property for this right of way. This is a little premature because of the laws that are there. Even though they've given it to us, we can't present it to you because we haven't followed the legal process, which the next steps will be, the value of this property is substantial. So we're going to have to declare, you as a board will have to declare the property surplus. Once you do that, then we have to advertise it for other interested parties, even though it's really an easement. There has to be enough property there to make it valuable so we can actually do a change in the property lines as we move forward through that. So we'll have it posted for 10 days. Then you'll have a public hearing on that. And then basically after we do the resolution, you'll have public hearing, and then we will be able to look at the proposal that they've given us. They have already done an appraisal. It came in a little over, it came in over the $50,000. I want to avoid using the exact amount for legal purposes. But that's what put us into this threshold. We can either accept that or the board can make a decision if they would like to go out and get a separate proposal or appraisal. That would cost us additional funds, which I don't see any reason why we would want to do that necessarily since they're using a licensed appraiser. In addition to that, once we get that appraisal, then we will, we're being told that Tacoma Power Utility is also going to be requesting a utility easement, which isn't selling property, but they're going to ask for an easement to run power to the poles and stuff that they're planning on putting out there.
I would add is that one of the requests that we made, which was met with a positive note from the city manager in our discussion, was if we can get in on the conversations earlier, then we wouldn't be so kind of out of sync with what they're planning and the timeline that they're planning, because we cannot just do, we can't just give them land. we have to go through these processes. And as Rick said, once we get past a $50,000 value threshold, there are more processes that we have to go through. And he was very understanding with that. And so we'll work to get in a better alignment. And so their timeline is not necessarily our timeline because of the processes we have to go through. We also discussed briefly that as we do these things in the future, if they're requesting, we incur legal fees for what we have to go through in order to surplus and, transfer that land. And so one of the things that we'll be looking at is whatever they value the land at, we may say, and we'd like plus whatever, given the outlook of the legal fees that may be ahead of us or how did you say it would, that plus all legal fees or something of that nature. So anyway, the timing of this seems a little bit like we're really off, and we are, but again, if we get in on the conversation early, then at least our team can start the ball rolling of, we see this coming, we might need to do this, or we might need to get our legal folks thinking about certain things prior to, and then that way we'll be closer in timeline, but we're kind of way off right now. And that would be because we weren't necessarily brought in as early as we could have been in the process.
So you may not be able to answer this question because I know you don't want to tell us what that price is, but in your opinion, is it fair value?
Based on the documents and the appraisal, I would say yes.
Thank you.
And I just had a quick question. The yellow trees, are they included in the 19 or are they included in the 31?
They're in the 19 trees that could potentially be impacted by this.
Got it. So it might not be 19. It could be less.
Right. And those trees will be on their property. So at that point in time, we're losing those trees either way.
Got it. So they wouldn't belong to us, but they might still exist.
Right.
Got it.
A couple of questions just based on the way the process works. So if we were to sell, or I guess this is sort of true anytime that the district would sell property, but like if we were to sell property, going through all those steps and all of that, how does that work for income? Do we put that just into the district general fund? Does that go into buildings and operations? How does that work?
RCW has real property that goes into your capital fund by law, by resolution.
You said something about, if it got to the point that we were then talking about price and you have to do the public hearings and all of those kinds of things, and someone else could buy it. So then, does that then become like a bidding war, or what does that look like?
It really can't. You're caught between a couple RCWs. Technically, the city would, for a public agency, they could use eminent domain and declare that, go after the property that way. Nobody can really go in here and do anything with this property. It's not enough square footage. It's a lot of linear footage along the roadway, but you could never build on this or anything. So we're kind of caught that this RCW says we have to do this. And then we're trying to meet the requirements of how they go through work with government agencies at the same time.
This could really use that it's really pretty much a sidewalk.
Right.
spot
We're
if
just
it were
checking the
nothing.
boxes for the process.
Okay. And then my last question is, you mentioned that then there would be another possible utility easement. Does that happen at the same time, or does that happen if we were to sell the property? Does the utility just work with the city then, or how's that work?
Well, it's a little different because where Tacoma Power Utilities wants to be is on our property. That would still be our property. It's setting the power boxes and things, and we're trying to get it so it'll be at the same time. But we've got to just being kind of straightforward. They haven't been well coordinated with this, and we haven't really had a good layout on our processes on how we're going to work. So we're going to hope that we can get it all worked out, be able to bring it. So we're doing it all at one time.
Oh, to follow up with Dana. So is this why when easements come along, they initially lay everything down and then afterwards they have to go back and open it back up and make it ugly?
Um, no, they shouldn't have to go back. So that's why it's kind of got to be coordinated at the same time. They could run all their lines and stuff in it and still not connect to the power box and stuff, what they would do on our property, but it makes sense to do it all at the same time.
Yeah, it would. And my question would be is so because the process didn't quite go as it is supposed to, what is our timeline?
Right now, I would tell you it will, the September board, we will bring in a declaration to declare the property surplus. Then we have to follow the guidelines based on your schedule. Unless you take action at a workshop, it would take you into the October board meeting. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
That concludes the district's reports tonight. Thank you, Rick.
So next, we'll move into the board president's reports. And actually, I don't really have any reports, so we'll move on from that. So for our first discussion topic, which is the board's annual self-assessment, in accordance with policy 1820, the board will annually assess its own performance in terms of generally accepted principles of successful board operations. WASDA offers a board self-assessment tool at no cost to the school board. It is designed to help boards assess and strengthen their performance in governing for improved student learning. The assessment is research-based and aligned with the Washington School Board standards. Once the assessment is completed, we have the option of reviewing the results ourselves or asking WASDA to review the results with the board at a cost of either $800 virtually or $1,100 in person for a 2 to 4 hour session. WASDA requires 48 hours advance notice once we are ready to use the assessment tool. So the board last completed the assessment in 2022. So we need to have the discussion of how would the board like to proceed with the annual self-assessment. So we're open for discussion on that. Director Kim.
Sure. I do think it's important that we do a self-assessment. It's been a while. And the WASDA process is vetted and research-based, so it makes sense to do that. So I think we would just need to come up with a timeline of what makes the most sense, in my opinion.
We want that assessment to be virtual or in person is the other piece to that.
In the past, has somebody outside facilitated a conversation around it, or has the board facilitated their own conversation?
With me as the superintendent, generally the board has facilitated its own conversation. I'm trying to remember in the 2022 timeframe, which was a tumultuous timeframe. I still don't believe we did. Was that Lubbock? Okay. So I think because it was a pretty tough moment in time that we did have a facilitator. And so I would recommend a facilitator because then it removes anyone from trying to have to run the meeting and you can just be a participant in the meeting. And of course, the data is already there. I would say we would ask it. Oh, it's the 48 hours is just for to open up the portal, correct? Yeah. So it's just your decision whether you would want that person to facilitate virtually while we're in the room, or would you want them to be here in the room? and then when we would want to do that.
So in terms of virtually or in the room, I think virtually works best when everyone is virtually or
Mhm.
no one is virtually. Like the half and half doesn't work well, or one and all, I don't think works very well.
I would recommend that that be, we typically have 2 nights in a January. We've reduced that to one night. And then as a board assessment, I think that that would be the board, myself, Carmen, and not the council. And so if we did a second night in January, I would say do it there because it can be up to a couple of hours easily, and potentially a little bit more. But that can also happen in a special meeting. That can happen whenever, as long as we post it correctly. And of course, it would be open to the public, just like this is.
Well, I would agree with Director Kim. I think it's either this or that, but not combined. And for me, my recommendation would be that the facilitator be in person. That's just mine.
This is the first time I'm thinking about it. So I'm not sure I have a totally formed idea yet because I need to ponder it a little bit. I think the timeline, I don't know that I have a strong feeling about that. January seems like it makes sense. My thought about, like, I guess what I'm trying to balance with the idea of a facilitator versus no facilitator, I see the benefit of that. I see the benefit of that, especially with a board that isn't necessarily communicating well and working well together. I think right now we have a board that does a really good job of that in most cases. So I'm just I know it's not a huge amount of money, but I know we are trying to be cognizant of money. I'm not sure that that's something we need to pay for right now. So it's just a thought I have, but interested in what other people think. In terms of virtual, so it would be like we would be here and they would be like on that. I have seen Zooms and stuff not work really well where you're all in a room because you can't see everybody, but it does seem like we have pretty good technology in here. Maybe we could do it, but I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Well, as I'm looking at the staff person's name, the staff contact, that would be one of our facilitators that we all got to enjoy on Friday afternoon. I don't know what happened on Saturday's class, but Rasami, and I know she had her name pronounced correctly in the presentation, but it's not here, so I hope I'm doing her name justice. But she seemed very engaging and wanting to make things better. So I too prefer in person with Director Kim. I think it's a better opportunity. And
So if I'm understanding correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but does that January timeline seem like that works? I mean, because that's the first thing we have to come to an agreement on is January. Is everybody good with January? Okay.
Looking at what we have to have done by then, but it seems like you're basically looking like we're doing self-assessment. I would imagine that we would each be doing that, and then that data would be put together. I don't know if we would get a chance to look at the data first, or if we'd be going through it with them, or how that works if we decide to have the facilitator.
You could decide whatever you wanted to do. I would put it forth to the facilitator and say, how do you get the best results? Is it bringing it after the fact, or is it allowing preview? They would probably have more experience in that space.
Okay. And then the second piece of that is, do we want a facilitator in person or do we want a facilitator virtually? Seem most agreed with in-person facilitator. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I was hearing. And I just wanted to go back to Director Kelleher's concern about the money to facilitate. And my thinking around that is we haven't done one yet as a group. So to have somebody come in and facilitate for us the first time would probably be helpful. And then after that, we should be able to facilitate it ourselves because then we'd have the experience.
I think that makes sense. And I know that if that's the person that comes and facilitates, but I'm sure everybody at WASDA that I've run into has been high quality, and I think it would be valuable. It was just, that was the first thought I had is I think we should be cognizant of what decisions are making based on that. So, but I do also feel it's not a huge ticket item. And so that makes sense to me. I'm happy to go with that.
All right, so January. Yes, Director.
Could you remind me what date? Because that would be 2 dates in a row, and I think I only have one on my calendar. So what the,
I don't have the date off the top of my head. It's usually the third week of January, fourth week. Yeah, fourth Monday.
We're saying that
Okay.
it's used to be a 2-day thing and now we've taken that day off. And so
Well,
this
yeah,
would
we've
be,
done January and June
Yeah.
workshops or retreats without the spa. And we've shrunk them to 1 day. And so this would be just adding another day that would just be with the board. I would also recommend then that we look at the middle of January in terms of entering the data, doing the actual assessment. And at that point, you will all have had a year together. And so that may, help in your
that part makes
responses.
sense. Actually, I didn't think of that in terms of January, but that makes sense.
You'll have a year together and you won't be antsy and calling me to ask for the data before the time that we actually review it.
So
Or
you're
you'll
saying
only
you
have
don't
2
want us to
weeks. You'll
fill out
only
the
have a
thing
week to,
now?
but yeah, you'll only have a week to come after me for that.
January
So it'll be
26th.
25 and 26. Yeah, so
And if we could get the survey opened in December so that I can complete it when I'm on winter break, that would be very helpful.
No, you have to do it during your class time. Anybody have any other questions or concerns about that? All right, thank you. At the June workshop, the board discussed following up on the January planning meeting with training related to difficult conversations at public meetings. We discussed the possibility of using WASDA or another facilitator to provide this training. The cost for WASDA is $800 for a 2 to 3 hour virtual session, $1,100 for a 2 to 4 hour in-person session, or $1,650 for a 5 to 8 hour in-person session. Another option would be to conduct the book study as presented by Director Lowry with the books that he purchased and gave to the board members. And we postponed the decision at the June workshop for future discussion. So I guess would the board like to move forward with the training or the book study, or do you have another approach? I know that Director Lowry has reached out to me several times to ask whether we would be introducing the book. So now's the time to kind of make a decision on, do we want WASDA to come in for another training or a facilitator to come in for that? Or do we want to try the book study? And we can certainly outline what that would look like if we decided to move forward with the book study. Or again, if somebody else has another idea, we can discuss. Director Kemp.
Yes, I think those are two different topics, right, though? So I would say for the difficult conversations, I think some of that will come up in our board self-assessment, and then we can lean into the WASDA person that's here facilitating that conversation as we're going through it, because how we communicate is part of the self-assessment that we do, if I remember correctly.
Don't think we can use the facilitator for that piece. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think you can use the facilitator well, I'll say double dip with the
Yeah.
facilitator to go into difficult conversation training. But I do believe you can lean into where you feel like you want your goals to be, where you feel like your needs are within that capacity.
And then I think there's also trainings on difficult conversations coming up at the WASDA conference. So that might be another place to get trained, or some of the free online trainings that are available through WASDA, or in-person trainings. So I think there are some options for that. The book study, I read the book when I first got on the board, and I need to reread it. But I think having an opportunity to come together and talk about different pieces of that would be valuable.
Initially was going to have the same reaction as Director Kim, in that I feel like those are two separate things. So I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book. I find it fascinating and I would love to talk about it with the board. I don't know what that structure looks like. And I do know that there's some issues in the book around communication, and it's possible that that's going to get more the third of the book that I haven't read. But I feel like the stuff in the book is really bigger than just communication, and it's about a lot of things. So I would love to have whatever a book study looks like. I don't know how we do that or what the options are, but I think there's options for having sort of discussions or conference time like this to talk about those ideas. So I'm more in favor of trying to find a way to do that. And then if we're really focusing on communication and difficult conversations, looking at what kind of training we want to do for that. But I do see those as two separate things. I feel like if we were going to do a book study on communication and difficult conversations, I would pick a couple other books, which potentially is a way to do it. I don't know. I think we'd have to see what the online WASDA offerings were, and if there are some. My only thought on the conference is that I think we've talked about only sending a couple of people. And so that's a little bit, I know we can bring information back and talk about that and say, I learned this, but it's not quite the same as if you're going to do a workshop on communication. I think you want all 5 of us here. But I think that middle option of the 1,100 for in-person for a couple of hours could be valuable, unless there's some kind of, I think we're going to get more out of that than we would a free online training, but I could be wrong about that. But that middle of the road seems okay to me. So those are my thoughts on that.
I am probably same with both of you. I'm reading the book. This is my second go around. This time I'm annotating. Fun times. So again, I don't think that's part of it either. I'm still in favor of the book study. And then just as I've continued to reflect on difficult conversations at public meetings, it may be just as simple as, well, at public meetings, I think is the tricky part, because sometimes I think we worry about what we're going to say because it becomes public record versus private conversations to resolve any misunderstandings. I created or put together a training on the ladder of inference, which talks about assumptions and how we make assumptions based upon our own experiences. So it might be something as simple as that, but not sure.
Okay. So you're correct. They're two different things, two different subjects. But what we have to decide is, do we want to continue to try to have the training on, difficult conversations, or do we want to set that over here for now and do the book study? So that's what we need to.
I'm in favor of that, to hold on the difficult conversations until after we complete the self-study and kind of get a feel for where we are and what we're thinking after that. And to jump into the book study, I think we could do a chapter or two at every planning meeting and just have a facilitated conversation. Like if each one of us agrees, hey, I'm going to facilitate these 2 chapters, and the next time somebody else facilitates, I think it could be pretty easy.
You're thinking that would be done at like a board workshop meeting? Is that, okay, that's what I would thought I understood. That does make some sense because I think communication and conversations and difficult conversations is a pretty huge topic. If what you're talking about specifically is how can we learn ways to talk at a public meeting, that might be, that actually might be a short online training might be sufficient for that. If you're talking more about how are we talking to each other, then that's kind of a different thing. And so I think maybe that idea of once we do the self-assessment and find out where our needs are, that might make more sense.
So then if I understand everybody, we are electing to proceed with the book study. Is that correct? Hands up from everybody? Okay.
Okay, we will begin to look at some possible protocols for how to engage in the conversation. And if any of you have anything that you would prefer in that realm, just feel free to reach out and we'll let you choose how you want to engage.
Yeah, and it might be something just as simple as director, you take 2 chapters, I take, it could be as simple as that, but we'll come back with what that guideline would be that we can discuss how we would move forward with that.
It's an appropriate time to give some positive feedback about some conversations and communication that was observed at the last workshop meeting. I don't know.
Sure.
So it was kind of a cool experience and story. So at the last, it might have been 2 ago. I didn't realize they were here because my back is often to the public, but one of our young local scouts was here with his mom as part of the citizenship in the, I don't know if it was community or society or which one of the badges it is, but they have to observe a public meeting and a political event and that kind of thing. And so he was sitting there with his mom and his mom was helping him find the things and he's watching us talk. And it was when we were having the conversation about the land acknowledgement. And he was sitting there and she said later, she told me, she said, I had to talk to him because he said, I'm supposed to be watching debating. I'm looking for debating. And she said, they are debating. That's what they're doing. And he said, what? And she said, that's how you respectfully communicate. That's how you disagree. That's how you pose a thought. That's how you do that. And he didn't even recognize it as that. And so it was really, she used us as an example of the way to have positive civil engagement. And I thought that was just a huge compliment to us and a thing that he got to learn. So I don't know, kudos to the way we talk to each other.
Thanks for sharing that. So moving forward, Vice President Chrissy Kim and Director Lowry have been working with the Executive Director Leanne Albright on the Board of Distinction application. The application window is open through September the 8th. And the Board of Distinction application is an evidence-based process in which applicants are evaluated against established criteria. So at this time, we'd like to have Director Albright and Vice President Kim brief us on where we are with that.
Good evening, President Thomas, Board of Directors, and Superintendent Banner. We are going to provide you an update on where we are at with the application process. And just as a reminder, the Board of Distinction is a reflective process for school boards and recognizes exemplary school board governance and leadership in supporting student learning. As you know, the board has been acknowledged as a Board of Distinction several times and was named Board of the Year for large school districts in 2019. I've had the opportunity to work with Vice President Kim and Board Representative Lowry on this process. So as part of that board application, it includes a section for the board to detail professional development over the past year. It provides opportunities for the board to share its efforts to remove barriers, close opportunity gaps, and promote student success. The board also identifies which standard its work aligns to, and our board has focused on WASDA Standard 4, holding school districts accountable for student learning. The board identifies what actions were used to create conditions and expectations for better student outcomes, and what parts of the work were completed by district and school staff. The application also presents evidence to support the board's work, including reflections on what the board has learned and any changes made. The board has focused its application around WASDA Standard 4, including its shift to monitor and support student growth beyond student proficiency, the creation of the 4 pillars of student success to provide a strong foundation for students, profile of a graduate, and focus on career pathways and rates. The board demonstrates strong governance by maintaining a clear focus on student outcomes, strategic priorities, and the long-term success of the district. Vice President Kim will elaborate more on the board's governance role and how the board works collaboratively with Superintendent Banner, maintaining appropriate roles and responsibilities while providing clear direction, accountability, and support to ensure our work remains centered around creating promising futures for students.
Thank you for that warm handoff. So one of the things that we put in the application around board governance was approving our strategic plan and how we have now aligned that more closely to removing barriers for individual students, how we've adjusted our accountability plan metrics towards student growth, and really looking at the disaggregation of data, adding least restrictive education data, and the student growth percentiles. So really digging into that data and looking more carefully at who's being successful and who isn't. Also, our gender inclusive language updates with our policies, the middle school audit, and implementation of the dual language and world language immersion programs. And then really looking at that line between what is our work and what is Superintendent Banner and the school district's work, and thinking about those delineations. So a lot of times we're doing the adoption and the review, and, you know, Superintendent Banner and his team are carrying out those directives in the way that they see fit to support our community. So looking at things that Superintendent Banner has done, like his Youth Advisory Council and how they report back to us, leadership and oversight of all of the curriculum and how that's reported back to us, working together on that annual accountability plan and all the data and metrics that are sent to us and the conversations that we have around that, and how that's all aligned to the performance evaluation of the superintendent. Perfect. Is that what you were hoping for?
Perfect. This year's application
practice.
includes data to support the board's work over 1 year to up to 5 years, and the data demonstrates how board governance decisions are supporting student growth while fostering the conditions necessary for students to succeed. By using data to monitor progress, identify needs, and along resources and policies, the board is strengthening an environment focused on continuous improvement and positive student outcomes. Dr. Kim will highlight some of that key data.
Yes. So we talked a while ago about our graduation rates. And so that is included in here because that is definitely a highlight, going from 88% to 93.7%. And then really looking at those points of disaggregation with our low-income students, our students with disabilities, and our multi-language learners that increased significantly. Also, our attendance data that has improved over the past 4 years. From 61% in middle school to 70%, 59% in high school to 63%. So that's all looking great. And then career ready. I don't know if y'all looked at this data, but CTE, which, you know, my heart is a little bit in the CTE world coming from early childhood ed, dual credits earned So there were 790 in 21, 22, and in 24, 25, 5,625. Like, wow. So, while this is called a board of distinction and we're putting all of this forward, I think it's also important to remember, like, we are setting the target and the district is doing a phenomenal job of getting us to those targets.
Thank you. So we appreciate your time this evening to give you an update on the Board of Distinction application process. I know you have a draft at your tables. That is a draft. Because there are character limits to that, we'll be revising and tweaking the supplemental portion of the application to fit into 3 pages, and you will be receiving a copy very soon of that draft. As Board President Thomas mentioned, the Board of Distinction application is due September 8th, and we're happy to answer questions you have.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to acknowledge the work that went into putting together this application. It's really well done. And there was I can tell there was a lot of research and thought put into it. And also I really appreciated the thought that acknowledging that while the board has some role in setting goals, the work that's really being done is being done by not only Superintendent Banner and his team, but all throughout this district and the teachers and all the staff that are working to do that.
Thank you, both.
I love-
All right, so I need to back up here just a minute. I think I missed a piece. The board's standard operating procedures, or the SOPs, are tied to policy 1620, which provides for the board to review its SOPs in January of odd number years following board elections. Our current SOPs were signed and dated October 14th, 2024. Our goal is to establish a schedule that allows the board to review and sign the updated SOPs no later than January 11th, 2027 at the regular meeting. When the board last reviewed the SOPs, the document was divided into 5 sections. One of our directors had suggested that we divide the document into 2 sections this time and review those sections during upcoming workshops. Tonight, I'd like us to work backward from our January 2027 deadline and establish a review schedule that works for the board. We have workshops scheduled in September and October. And we need to decide what schedule and process would the board like to use for reviewing and approving the SOPs. So any comments or suggestions?
As a clarification, it sounds like there's 2 workshops before January
September and
and
October.
October, because we don't have a workshop in November or December. Is that correct?
Early in November, you have WASDA, and so you don't have a workshop. And then December, yes, there's no.
And how many SOPs are there? I guess I have 2 questions. How many SOPs are there to review? And this is separate from the policies and procedures because we were working on, I mean, I get that they're related, but we were working on sort of a schedule for that, or there's already a schedule for that. Is that true? I'm just trying to keep it all straight in my mind.
Go, yeah, because I'm confused now.
So the policy schedule that we review through WASDA that is brought to us, there's a schedule for that where we go through and we look at like the 2000, the 3000. The standard operating procedures are separate and within. And it's something that we need to review periodically to make sure that we're all on the same board, because it's the agreements that we make with each other and with the school district about how we're going to interact, and our policy, not our policies, but more our procedures and working conditions. So yeah, last time we broke it down quite a lot. I think we could do it in 2 sections this time, and the 2 that we have remaining, and just divide it in half and do half at each section.
That was my suggestion, instead of, because there's a lot going on, right? This
Mhm.
time of year with this, that, and this. And it seemed like when we broke it up into 5 different, it's like just drug it out. And I think we could power through it just in 2. So,
I
Yeah.
still am wondering about how many there are, if anybody has an idea of that.
So in your binder, there's the entire document is
Yeah.
split into 2 potential sections.
Okay.
And so it's about 7 pages.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have different subheadings under on the pages. So there's no like number.
Okay. I understand. Okay. So we would basically do half of it in September and half of it in October. And we would prepare ahead of time by looking at them and bringing our thoughts and
So
Right.
the last time we did this, we had 4 distinct questions to promote your thinking around it. The first, which would be, what questions do you have regarding this particular section of SOPs? Next question, what comments would you like to share with your fellow board directors regarding that section? What concerns would you like to share with your fellow board members regarding that section? And then the last one, what suggested changes, if any, do you have for the section of the SOPs? Again, those are what we used last time. Those would be my suggested prompts, not that they're finite in nature, but that just helps drive the conversation. Each board director has the opportunity to share. And I think we went around question 1 and everybody did question 1, responded at question 2, and everybody did question 2. And then when you get to the changes piece, I think that's probably the bigger discussion point because sometimes it's wording, sometimes it's contextual in nature, and that's where you can have that debate that you talked about earlier.
we learned at our training this weekend that that first model is called the round robin model, where we each take a turn and say one statement, and the end part was be called the open discussion, where you would have an exchange. So we're familiar now with those modes of presenting.
Maybe we can use that for the book too. We'll see.
Well, and I thought last time the questions, are you sure these were the identical questions that we had? Because they were very redundant and it was not a flowing situation.
Well, we used the same question for each section and we had several sections, 5 or so sections. So
Yeah.
Well,
it
it
would have
just
been
seemed like
repetitive in that
the
nature.
questions, sure, that makes sense. But comments and concerns, I think that I think that happens at the same time.
You can have it any way
You can also pass. in
3 of
round
you
robin.
want.
Good Lord.
Okay, so are we in agreement that we would do this in 2 sections at our September and October meetings? All right.
So essentially, what we will do is make sure you get these at some point in the next week or so that you can prep for your September workshop meeting. And then the same thing will happen after that. So you can prep for your October workshop meeting.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we need to have a discussion about the upcoming WASDA conference. I know in prior meetings, we as a board decided that we would not send the entire board to conferences for cost savings. And we talked about sending maybe 2 or 3 to WASDA, and then they would come back and share with the rest of the board things that they learned. So WASDA is November 19th through the 21st in Spokane. And just kind of want to get a feeling about who is interested in attending so that we can make those plans.
I would actually prefer to not attend this WASDA conference. I have a commitment with the Scouts that weekend anyway. And so if we're only sending some, it's not a great weekend for me. So I would be happy to have somebody else take that spot.
Could ask who still needs to meet equity training requirements or other training requirements that could be met at WASDA and maybe prioritize those folks.
Yeah, I think at this particular time, there's only one director who has not completed all their training. And that director is not here, so.
Expect him to go.
Well, that's if he's
Works.
not on a raft going down the African jungle or something. We will check with Director Lowry, but Director Kim, are you?
Always up for learning, but I don't want to take a place away from somebody else who needs it. But I'm more than happy to go and bring back what I learned.
Director Kim? Or I just talked to you. Thank you. Director Caldwell.
I'm always happy to go too. I have a more flexible schedule, so it's not going to impact my work.
So Director Caldwell, Director Kim, and we will ask Director Lowry if he would like to go. And if Director Lowry cannot go, then I will take his place. That
Record. I'm always up for learning too. It's just not a great weekend.
you'd rather be out camping with the bugs and stuff like that. So
I would rather do a 10-mile hike with a bunch of kids.
I can also step back to allow other people to go. Just
we're
be flexible.
thank you. We're fine. I think we've got a plan here. Okay. Everybody's stepping out. Nobody's going. Next, review, the General Assembly timeline. And we'd like Director Caldwell to kind of update this for us.
So the General Assembly this year, I couldn't believe the number of changes that districts were proposing. This was like clearly we had some school district thoroughly went through position statements and different things that they felt could be retired or were redundant. And when you look at the document, pay particular attention to the consent agenda. There are a number of items in the consent agenda because the districts that proposed things, the committee that reviewed them also agreed with them. And so a lot of things that they found were redundancies and, are ready to have those statements or positions retired, eliminated. So that in particular was a lot. But then later, as you go through the different items and you get past that consent agenda, you're going to find more things that the committees decide aren't what they think is in the best interest of WASDA. So I took my notes on the computer and I haven't brought out my computer, so I'm sorry.
Are you saying, Director Caldwell, that the consent agenda things are things that the WASDA agreed with, and then the stuff that comes later, they didn't necessarily?
Well, no, not necessarily, but yes,
Okay.
the consent agenda, they agreed that those items could either be eliminated or consolidated. And then as you go through the different pieces, you'll notice that some of the legislative committee recommendations say do pass and others say do not pass. And so there are varying opinions throughout the document, to be quite honest. And WASDA felt very strongly about which items they felt needed to be continuing and staying within the, the vision, the direction that WASDA takes. So some of the things that seemed to want to be removed by districts included, like one I remember is the civil liberties and the civil rights laws. Thought that those should be eliminated, and WASDA said no. We feel very strongly about those. Also, there were some things on cell phone banning or restricting the use, and that was interesting as well. I think one of the propositions in here, proposals, had a do pass and another one had a do not pass because one seemed really overly restrictive, and they want to make sure that their policies and positions support overall the entire state, not just a small portion of the state. So they didn't want to limit anyone's flexibility. So that is what I found. I've gone through it twice now. And like I said, my notes are actually on the computer. I didn't print this out all by myself, so I appreciate the printout. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So directors, as you spend all your spare time reading this, we ask that you please bring it back with you for the next two meetings in September, right? That's what it says right here. Who wrote this?
Director Caldwell will be voting at the General Assembly on the 19th.
19th.
Our meeting in September, our first meeting in September is on the 14th. And so for the 14th, we need to have this document filled out, collated. And so Carmen will take your yeses and nos. She will collate them across the board. And then at the end, she will fill in a yes or a no based on whether 3 or more of you have agreed to that particular response. And so let's just take number 1, for example, advertising of tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis, which is on page 19 of your packet for you to review. This indicates do pass. Now, I don't know what the resolution is. I haven't read what they're asking to pass. It may say pass as we don't want to do that. So you would say yes or no. And if you say yes, you're saying yes to that action, do pass. If you say no, you're saying no to that action. In the end, does your board agree with the recommendation of do pass? That will be determined based on the number of yeses and nos. So we need that back prior to the 14th, and we'll get these dates out. And Carmen, you beat me up if I'm wrong here. So that way you can have an opportunity to discuss in public on the 14th. And at the end of that meeting, whatever's on here will be the voice of one for our ledge rep, Director Caldwell, to vote at the General Assembly. So I recognize we may have misprinted
Right.
there.
So as in the past, Carmen, will you be sending us that form electronically so that we can? Okay,
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe we
Some of
should,
the actions, some of the recommended actions are do not pass. So if you say yes, that means we do that.
maybe we should just put.
We
D-
did it in the past.
Yeah, DP and DNP. Go ahead.
What I'm remembering from the past is we voted yes for pass, no for do not pass. And then like WASDA's recommendation was on the side to give us guidance.
I see
I think-
the WASDA recommendation on the side. I see the proposer rationale on the right-hand side. So WASDA's on the left. I feel like I also am seeing it the same way. I don't know how you did it before, but the same. So if you look at page 89 is the first one that I found that says do not pass. So if the recommendation is do not pass, and I say yes, that means I agree with that.
I'm
So
going to put pass and do not pass on mine, just to be
Well,
clear.
whatever we do, we have to be consistent.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if I
yes.
look at this last column, the last column reads, does your board agree with the recommendation? The recommendation is in the first column.
Okay.
So if we said yes, according to this, then the board would agree with this recommendation. So if there's a do not pass, and that's the recommendation from WASDA, if the board voice of one says yes, then you are saying you agree with the recommendation. And we kind of went through this before as well. So I remember this.
Okay.
Like a
Yes
no was like a
means
double
you
negative.
agree with the recommendation.
And it's specifically, you agree with the legislative committee recommendation, because there are going to be different recommendations on here. For example, that page 89. Perhaps WASDA is saying, they don't agree, and the proposing district is saying they do. So, right?
okay. So again, we need to decide whether we're going to do yes, no, no pass or pass.
I'm there now. So I put my little note, yes means agree with this column.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna do yes or no.
Does that work for you?
Agree with the position?
Yeah.
Yes or no.
Agree with the committee recommendation, which is the first column on this
Mhm.
flow sheet.
Okay.
Stop it.
I have a cup I can throw.
I appreciate that we're asking the question and we're getting clarity before we set out on this journey. But and the only thing that I would say is we need to be consistent. That way the 14th will be a lot smoother if we're
Oh,
consistent.
for sure. I have one more clarification question. So we were looking at that first one. So where will I find the proposal? So I see that this is a proposal on advertising of tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis. I see what WASDA says. I see the proposer rationale. Where is the
The real
actual
ones?
thing?
It starts.
Page 19 of this document. So if you look at the end of that, number 1, advertising of tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis, page 19. It's page 19 of this document.
Or are you meaning where does the consent agenda stop?
I'm not meaning either of those things. So let me see if I can, figure out what I'm trying to say.
This is this one.
Yep, I'm with you there. So what is the actual proposal? This is not just the rationale of it. This is the actual proposal.
Well, this is the current position.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the rationale for, we're saying shorten the handbook. So
That's my question is what are we proposing? So they're saying they're proposing to shorten the handbook by 100 pages.
and then it's a duplicate.
Okay. I guess my question is like, in order to see whether that makes sense or not, I got to know exactly what it is, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
The adoption of this proposal will be retired. So this
Mm-hmm.
would no longer be. That
We
right?
would just take that current position out. Let me look at a different one and see if I can make it make sense in my head.
So all of the ones in the consent agenda, there is no disagreement on. The people who proposed the position, WASDA is in complete agreement with that. So that's, I believe, why they're calling it the consent agenda, just like us. When we have a consent agenda, we've already read it all, but we don't need to go through and say yes or no to each item.
So then it would be really looking at page 44 on, which is where there may or may not be agreement.
I mean, you should read them all, yes, but I'm pretty sure that's the purpose of that section is that all of those were agreed to.
So that makes sense to me.
We're all agreed to be removed
Retired.
when it
Mhm.
says retired. So they're taking that
Right.
language out.
Do you understand what I'm asking? Director Thomas, President Thomas?
I kind of am, but I think I understand how they explained it. I don't think I can do it.
Okay. I'll read it and I'm sure that I'll understand it more. And if I don't, I'll ask a question. Thank you.
All right. At this time, the board's going to recess into executive session to discuss some district legal matters and bargaining. And I anticipate probably about 30 minutes and then we'll return. Thank you. It's 7:15 and we are back from executive session. Nothing on the agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved?
Moved by Director Kim. Is there a second?
A second, please.
Second by Director Caldwell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.